Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Andrew's Journey. Now, if you have watched my previous videos discussing the depression, somewhat controversial issue of homelessness, I thank you. If you haven't, go back and watch it. You'll learn a lot. This video is going to be about homelessness once again, except this video is going to be about homelessness on a much higher note. This video is going to be about how to prevent yourself from becoming homeless in the first place. Now, I will start by saying that sometimes homelessness will happen as a result to circumstances that are beyond one's control. But I will also say that a lot of times homelessness happens due to circumstances that people may have had control over, and that's going to be the discussion of this video. Are ways that you can avoid homelessness, things that happen to many people that may have resulted in them being homeless, that you can avoid doing yourself. You can avoid making some of the mistakes that people before you may have made that may have caused them their homelessness. So let's get into it. Now, a few ways that people can avoid being. Now, before I even go into this topic, I'm going to first talk about myself briefly. Now, 10 years ago, I was homeless for a brief period of time. Now, depending on how I choose to tell the story, some people might say that I could have prevented the issue. Other people may say that things happened and I had no control. I'm going to be brutally honest. Now, looking back at everything, I would say that I had control. Now, back during the early and mid 2000s, I was out here spending money like a crazy man. I was spending money like a joint congressman, as Dave Ramsey would put it. Back in 2006, I purchased me a condo. And within that same year, I went out and I bought me a brand new car. And then a couple years later, in 2008, I purchased me a brand new house, just built, sitting on an acre of land. And within that year, I bought me another new car. So by 2009, I had a brand new house and 2 new cars. Now, people who thought they knew me, they assumed I was doing well for myself. They assumed I was successful. But in reality, I was stupid. And the reason why I called myself being stupid was because, now remind you, this was back in the dark ages where banks granted people loans who had a freaking pause. Now during this time, I was making like $12.50 an hour on my job. Now, granted, I was working 2 jobs to keep up with all the debt that I've accumulated, but I was making around $12.50 an hour or so, which, that's for the kind of debt I ran up. $12.50 an hour is nothing. But anyway, make a long story short, I woke up one day in 2009 and I was tired. I was so tired, it was ridiculous, man. At this time I was working 60 plus, I was working like 70 hours a week. Some weeks I was working close to 80 hours a week between my 2 jobs. There were a lot of times that I would come home from work and I would be so tired. I would be so tired that I'd fall asleep at the door. Like at the time with my house, I had my sofa by the door. So I'll step in the house, put my stuff down, sit on the sofa for a minute. Before I knew it, I was out like a light bulb. And I didn't wake up until the next morning. I got home around midnight, I mean, and then I wake up around maybe, 7 o'clock or so in the morning, in time for me to get ready to go my first job. And a lot of times between my jobs, I'll work my main job, and sometimes even on my main job, I would fall asleep during lunch. And then when I got off my main job to go to my second job, there's a lot of times that when I pull up in the parking lot, I will fall asleep. The second I pulled in the lot, I fall asleep. I mean, there's a couple of times I had my car door open and I was hunched over, and I had some coworkers come up to me and made sure that I was okay, and I told me I'm okay. I was just sleeping. And there were a couple of times that when I was on my way home from work, I didn't fall asleep behind the wheel, but my eyes was hurting, and I was dozing off a little bit, which is dangerous, by the way, when you're behind the wheel. And then fast forward a little bit, there's one day I woke up and I felt like shit. I didn't feel real at all. So I called in that day from work. And when I got off the phone, my plan was I was going to get off the phone and then go right back to bed because I was super tired. But when I got off the phone, something hit me. Like, it hit me so hard that I couldn't go back to bed. I stayed up the rest of the day. I mean, I was still tired, but I couldn't go to sleep. So I started thinking real hard about how I was living my life, about the amount of debt that I've accumulated. And I started going through my bills, started going through my budget, and I was comparing that to my earnings, to my take-home earnings. And needless to say, my monthly payments on everything, to include my debts, my utility bills, my food, my gas, and all that, was more than what I was bringing home. I mean, I even ran into a time where I was taking out those payday loan advance type deals. I was doing that for, I would say, like 2.5 months or so straight. I was going to the payday advance places, taking out loans, paying all that interest all the time. So anyways, I woke up one day. That was the day I called in from work, and I couldn't go back to sleep. So I started thinking, it's like, what am I doing with myself? So I took like several hours and I thought about everything real hard. And then I went online and started looking around for bankruptcy lawyers. And I found one. I went in, I talked to him, and we discussed my options. And since I really didn't have any assets, I was able to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which is what I did. So during this bankruptcy, I decided to get rid of everything. I decided to get rid of both my cars and my house because financially it was killing me. I was not happy at all. I mean, people looked at me kind of funny once I told them what I was doing, but I explained to them that, I'm not happy. I'm miserable. I'm tired of working myself to the point where I'm so tired I can't even focus. I mean, I'm tired of having no spare time. I'm tired of not being able to travel or go anywhere or do anything or enjoy life because I got all this debt hanging over my head. So when I filed my bankruptcy, I let everything go. I let my 2 vehicles go and my house. So I went from a brand new house and 2 brand new vehicles to an apartment and a $300 piece of junk van. Which, by the way, I drove it for 6 months before I had enough money saved up to buy something tad better. So fast forwarding from that situation, I wanted to leave Tennessee because I was no longer happy in Tennessee because of all the things that have happened, which, by the way, were my fault. But nevertheless, I wanted a fresh start. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm from Ohio, so I'm gonna go to Toledo, which was only an hour and a half from where I was raised, which was in Greater Cleveland, which is where my family at. So I said, okay, I'm gonna move to Toledo and be an hour and a half away from family. So I decided to go to Toledo, and when I went to Toledo, I had a rental property in Toledo. I mean, I rented an apartment for a real short period of time in Toledo. And then, to make a long story short, I was in a traffic accident back in 2009, I want to say. No, back in the winter of 2008, I was in a traffic accident, which was not my fault. So I received a settlement from that accident. So while I was up in Toledo, I decided to buy me a house, and I bought one. I paid cash. So I've had that house for several months. Here's how. So I've had that house for several months. Now, when I first got to Toledo, I had a job. I mean, at first I had a job working at a nursing home, but I didn't like that job. I had one of my residents spit on me, so I quit that job because I didn't want to deal with it. And plus, I didn't care for working third shift, which that job was a third shift. So I was thinking at the time, okay, I'm gonna be all right. I mean, I got a paid off house, so what can go wrong? I mean, I can get a job at McDonald's and be good. Well, make a long story short, the economy there was so bad, and remind you, this was during the recession, but even to this day, the economy there is still pathetic. But anyways, the economy there was so bad at that time that I couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. I mean, I was not able to find a job to save my life in that city. And then several months later, I found me a job working as a maintenance person for this apartment complex. There's a crew of 13 of us. Well, one day, the owner of that property, he decided to get rid of every last one of us, even the apartment manager, for whatever reason. So I lost that job after a few months. Then I got a job at Walmart. I got a job as an assembler. Well, me and that supervisor did not get along. So, making a long story short, I got terminated from that job after a few months. So at that point, I gave up on looking for work in Toledo because the economy was so bad. So at that point, I went on ahead and I packed up a few items. And remind you, at this time, I was driving a two-door Chevy Cavalier. So at this point, I packed up some non-perishable food, packed up a couple of clothes and a few other items, threw it all in my trunk in my back seat, and I decided to head to Indiana because I had a couple of good friends that used to live in Indiana, and they told me that Indiana had a pretty stable economy. So I moved to Indiana. And when I got to Indiana, of course, in Indiana, at that time, when I first got there, I didn't have a place to stay. I spent, I want to say, a month and a half or two staying in my car. Like during the day, I would go job hunt. And then at the end of the day, when it got dark, I would sleep in my car. And then in the morning time, I woke up, I had a gym membership, I went to the gym and I took a shower, and you know, and did all my hygiene stuff. And then when I landed a job in Indiana, which didn't take real long, it took me a couple of weeks. But when I first landed a job, I still had no money at that point because my house in Toledo has not sold. At this point, the house in Toledo was still on the market because when I first left Toledo, before I left Toledo, I put my house on the market. So when I first got to Indiana and I first started working in Indiana, I had no money. I was broke. My house was on the market. So at first, I've continued to live out of my Chevy Cavalier. Like I would go to work during the day, go work out after I got off of work, take a shower, brush my teeth and all that, grab me a bite to eat, and then I would go to this one truck stop, which was in Indianapolis, and that's where I would sleep. And then I woke up the next morning, and I basically repeated that same routine over again until my house sold. So finally, when my house sold, I got my money. Now, remind you, I took a significant loss due to the housing market being lousy and also due to all the fees I had to pay my realtor. So finally, when my house sold, I got my money, and the money I received, rather than having enough sense to purchase me a van or even an RV for a few $1,000s and live out of that and save money, my stupid butt decided to rent hotels. So I would say for a month and a half, I was renting hotel rooms, which ate up a ton of that money. And then finally, I got my apartment. And after I got my apartment, I kind of got careless. I mean, I was out here doing a bunch of traveling and doing a bunch of things with money that I shouldn't have been doing. So before I knew it, the money I got from the sale of my house was gone. I spent it all. And once again, I was broke. Now, I told you people that this video was going to be about how to prevent yourself from becoming homeless. Obviously, I went on a tangent and decided to talk about my own experience with bad financial choices. So I apologize. But this is a good video for you people to watch. It's a good lesson for you people to learn. So I promise the next video will be about how to prevent homelessness to happening to you. So I will see you on that video. Have a good one.